is actually UA compliant. It supports IDNs properly, for example, and therefore um, much of the code which is available in open source using Python is UA ready. So, for example, if you're developing or reusing code in Java, you need to be extra careful that you use it in a way that it is UA compliant, or otherwise extended to make sure that you support the different types of domain names and email addresses. In a similar way, we've also looked at content management systems. Currently, we did a pilot study on WordPress and found out that many of the relevant, the core content management system and many of the extensions which are relevant to email addresses and domain names, they support the domain names reasonably well. But if you look at the column 3 and 4 here, when we look at how they support internationalized email addresses, the support for such email addresses is actually very low. There's hardly any support. And therefore, if you're using WordPress as a content management system, it may actually not. And if you're creating websites using this content management system, it may not actually work or support email addresses in your own language and script. And that obviously is a challenge for those who are using the platform to develop their websites. And you may want to, I guess, consider this detail when you um, look at your or decide on the tool which you are choosing to develop your work. What we actually did was also look at the actual impact on these systems on the website. What we surveyed about 1,000 websites globally and looked at whether their contact us page, where they normally ask for user email and user email, whether they would accept email addresses of the different types which um, were shared earlier. The dot sky is an example of the new short. Dot engineering or dot international is the example of dot new long top level domain. And then we also tried these in Chinese and Arabic and other languages and scripts, and saw whether the websites, these top 1,000 websites globally, could accept these email addresses. Um, so you may want to keep in mind that basically websites which have email addresses in ASCII or English, um, um, and in the legacy top level domains like .com or .net or the country codes, two-letter country codes, they are normally accepted almost 100% of the time. But with these new top-level domains and domain names and email addresses in local languages, it becomes more challenging. So we'll see that as we see, if we start from the bottom, .sky, for example, is only supported by about 98% of the website, which is still reasonable. But with the .international or .engineering, the acceptance of email addresses goes down to about 85%. And if you look at just email addresses in local languages, for example, Arabic or Chinese, the acceptance rate is only about 11%, which means 89% of these websites are rejecting these email addresses as valid email addresses, even though they are actually valid email addresses. And that's obviously a problem. So not only the applications, but also the email servers or email ecosystem should support internationalized email addresses. That means the user agent, submission agent, transfer agent, delivery agent, they all need to support internationalized email addresses for the email ecosystem to work. We've actually looked at some of these services as well as tools, and we found that there is now good support for internationalized email addresses, but of course they need to be configured properly when they're deployed for this to be made available. We've actually also in 2019 did a survey on all the mail servers which are deployed We sampled 10,000 mail servers from the different GTLD zones and found out that only about 9.7% of these are EI ready, um, um, or they support internationalized email addresses. And this is still quite a gap. So, still about 90% or more than 90% of the email servers out there which are deployed do not support internationalized email addresses. And that is something we obviously need to fix. Um, so that's a bit of a background on where we are with regard what universal acceptance is and what is the current state of acceptance of the different domain names and email addresses. And I'm now going to hand it over to our colleague Champika, who's going to take you briefly through. So, if we have these 90% of the mail servers which are not supporting EAI, how do we set these up properly so that they can actually work with internationalized email addresses? So, with that, thank you for listening, and I'll hand it over to Champika to take us through um, the next part of the presentation. Thank you, Champika.
Yeah, thank you, Samad. And hello, everyone. As Samad said, I will try to go through the EAI supporting aspect. I hope that you can see the slides well. And so if I go to the next slide, Samad. Yeah, actually, in fact, this slide was covered by Samad earlier. So I think main point here, what we want to focus is that last point on that internationalized email addresses. You can see that there are different categories of email addresses. The mailbox can be in ASCII, whereas the domain can be in UTF-8 or IDN based. And then also you can see there are some different examples over there. Yeah, the mailbox also can be on UTF-8, and then also it can be based on different scripts. For example, the mailbox can be from one type of script, and the domain can be of another type of script as well. So, and also one thing that you might want to see, the last example, there are some scripts that we write from right to left as well. Typically, we have left to right, but then there are some languages, some scripts like Arabic, where you will find the email ID also is written from right to left as well. So these are some different categories. Even just like Sarmad showed you earlier, the whole idea here is that what sort of email ID it is, in what format it is, the application should support that. That's the key. So if I go to the next slide, Samad. Yeah, so we need to understand here what is EAI and what is not EAI. So that is something important for us to understand. So when we have UTF-8 support uh, in the mailbox and the domain, so which means after the at sign, that is the domain, then we can say that that's EAI. Whereas you might see some emails, obviously, where you will see some local language scripts. It could be in the subject line, or maybe in the address commands, or it could be in the message body, for example. So these things we have already experienced even in the past. So if you see some, say, some local language scripts in your message body, these things can be handled by MIME. So in our context that we are talking along with EAI, these things will not come into the picture. Uh, so that's something that I just want to highlight here, that does not fall into EAI category. So next slide, please, Saman. Now, with that sort of idea, definition, now we can try to categorize these email IDs based on the support or the EI implementation based on the support levels. Say, for example, if the application or the tool cannot support any email ID internationalization, we say that there is no EI support there, which means only the ASCII emails can be supported by those tools and services. Sarmad also actually earlier showed you some statistics as well. Obviously, the ASCII emails, we can assume that, it's 100%. But when it comes to the other email IDs, it is much less. So those ones we can put into two different levels. One is called level 1, where we can send an email to an EAI-based email ID, and also we can receive a response from an EAI address as well. So if we can send and receive to and from an EAI-based email ID, we can say that we have level 1 support. But that does not include creating mailboxes. For example, if you go to a certain mail program, or it could be a public domain mail program, if you can't really create an email ID based on EAI, or if you can't create a mailbox, then we would not put this into in that support category. So that this is where we say we can only have level 1. Whereas level 2 means we can support all these. So which means we can send emails, we can receive emails from EAI-based email addresses, and also we can create mailboxes and those domain names also in UTF-8, right? So this is the level 2 support. Next slide. Now, based on the support categories or supporting options or possibilities, we can try to sort of label those different tools. Now, we also need to understand that in a typical mail system, when you try to send mail from one place to another place, in this whole mail system, there are different components. For example, there is a component for client, there is a component for the mail servers, which means the transport part and delivery part, and so on. So you can see that different components are listed in this chart, where you can see something like MUAs, MSAs, and so on. MUAs are mail user agents, pretty much basically the clients, whereas MSAs are mail submission agents, because when we send an email, it goes to a submission system. In a typical scenario, this mail submission agent could be always built in to a mail transfer agent, or simply what we call a mail server. So MTA is basically a mail transfer agent, where you might also in a real environment you might see number of MPAs in a certain path, and then we have MDAs, or what we call mail delivery agents, mail delivery agents, and then we have the clients as well. So if you see these different components, right, that I explained to you earlier, some of these components may support EAI, whereas some of these components may not support EAI. So this is what actually which is highlighted in this chart against those different tools and services. So if you, based on our earlier classification, I explained you what is L1, what is L2, level 2, and so on. So you can see some products or some tools and services, they do have full support, where you can see in green and L1, L2, and so on, which components can support what. And also some of these tools and services, they may not have the full support. They may probably only support few of the components, few of the functionalities, and some partial support as well. Now, by the way, this is all. This study was carried out by the Universal Acceptance Steering Group, And this is all published in the USG website as a white paper, which is listed over here. In fact, very recently there have been some further updates to this. Some more tools were added, some software were added as well. So I would recommend you to actually go to USG website and see the white paper for the latest figures as well. Next slide. Now, when it comes to the email protocols, as I told you earlier, there are different components that we have in a typical mail system. And in the same way, some of these some of these functions are handled by different protocols. For example, when the mail goes from one server to another server, we have a protocol called SMTP, or Simple Mail Transfer Protocol. And then when the mail goes, say, from a delivery system to a client, then we also use some other protocols like POP or IMAP. So
So
these are
these are
different protocols that includes in a mail delivery system. Now, the key to here is that when we have to support EAI or emails in local language scripts, we need to make sure that these protocols can support EAI, which means the those different components in a mail system should be able to understand the EAI based emails. So that is what we are trying to tell here. All those protocols that are involved, like SMTP, POP, IMAP, and so on, they should be able to provide that support. So first of all, as I showed you earlier, the product or the tool should support it, and but we need to make sure that it is already we are configuring it to make sure that the protocols are also being supported. Next slide. And so this is just a example to show this support aspect with regard to these protocols. Now you can see a sender and a receiver in this diagram, and in between you can see those different components that I explained to you earlier: mail user agent, the mail transfer agents, um, basically the mail servers. Now, if you take say the communication between say two mail servers. In this case, you can see we have put a S for sender. That means one of the servers sending the emails, and then the other mail server or the MTA is receiving the email. So between these mail servers, there is some communication happen during the transfer of emails. So this communication would result in exchanging some signaling. I mean, there will be some sort of signaling happening between these mail servers. So those signalings, you can see that, if you see those communication which is shown in in the slide, all that S and R with the sender and receiver, there are several messages that have been exchanged between the sender and the receiver. Now, I don't want to go into too much detail, of course, in going through every line, but something that you might want to focus here is, say, the support related to the EAI, which is actually SMTP UTF-8, where you can see from arrow here. So when the sending mail server or the MTA send, when it tried to send the email, it will, of course, need to get an acknowledgement from the receiving server saying that what sort of support it can do. So, say for example, if it can support attachments or MIME, it should respond with that. In the same way, if it can support email address internationalization or local language based email addresses, it should respond to the sending mail server with an acknowledgement of SMTP UTF-8 signal. So that's what you can see there. So if you see those arrows pointing to SMTP UTF-8, which means it can support EAI-based emails. So this is something to observe. So if this signaling flag is not there, then the mail, we will not be able to deliver that mail to that particular MTA. Next slide, please. Now, one thing also you need to be aware, because if there are many servers along the path, because say for example, if I send an email to you, you could be in a certain network, I am in a certain network. In between us, there can be some other mail servers. So my mail server, say in the network that I am in, my mail server could be forwarding it to a mail server, say intermediary mail server, and then that could be forwarding to another, and so on. So until the mail gets to the end. But the whole important point here is that all those mail servers along the path, they should support EAI. If you remember that I told you earlier, what are the things that we need to we need to fulfill to make sure that the EAI would be supporting. So all those requirements need to be met in with regard to those every mail server that you find in the path. So this is quite important. Now, if any of the mail server cannot cannot accept that EI email, then the mail server that is going to send that email will not be able to send it. So it will basically drop that email, and then the sender will need to be notified with a sort of a failure message. So that should be the way. Next slide. So and the other thing is actually what we need to also understand is, now typically any mail operator or mail service, typically they may have multiple mail servers, right, as I also explained to you earlier. Now these mail servers are listed in DNS as well. So when say if you take a certain domain, right? So domain is if you remember when we explain about the email ID, the part onto your after that sign, right? So that is your domain. So whatever the mail servers that support that domain in terms of sending the emails, we need to list those, or we need to publish those in DNS. So this is done through MX records. So for a given domain, you might see many MX records or number of mail servers. So something for us to, especially if you are configuring these mail servers, or if you are configuring your DNS, make sure that all those mail servers that you are listing in your DNS, they can all support EAI. Otherwise, if say only some of them can support and some of them cannot support, in case if one fails, because depending on different priorities and so on, it can take different paths. So if some of those mail servers cannot support, then our email will not be delivered. Sometimes if it goes through the supporting mail servers, it can be delivered. But if it goes to the non-supporting email servers, it may not get delivered. So so this can be a kind of intermittent problem. So to avoid that, we have to make sure that even in DNS, all those MX records that you list, they should have the EAI mail support. Next slide. There are a few additional considerations. One thing is the case folding. In typical ASCII-based email IDs, we really don't care much about the case folding, because either you can write your email ID in simple letters, or even uppercase letters as well. Still, the email would get delivered. but this is not automatic in EAI. Many of the tools and services would not support that. So this is not a functionality in EAI. But we don't have to actually worry too much about this one, because many of the scripts, especially in the Asia Pacific region, most of these scripts that what we use, we don't really have this lowercase, uppercase issue actually, right? We only have one sort of script. So this is not a major issue as such. Another thing is spam. Even though we still use EAI, we still have to have those spam filters and so on. We still have to use, best practices like SPF, DKIM, DMARC, and so on. We just like in normal spam system, we will still use those in EAI-based email as well. In terms of software and services, some of these tools and services, just like what we showed earlier, they may not support EAI, so we need to be aware of that as well. Next slide. Uh, One more thing that we need to take some care, especially when we are creating mailboxes. Say in your local corporate environment, if you're going to create some EI-based email IDs, you need to have some certain guidelines and some best practices. Again, there are some documentation here from the USG website with regard to this. There are some papers on this. But this is kind of very short summary of that. So we would recommend you to go through more in detail if someone is doing this. So the bottom line is that if we need to make sure the security aspect when you try to create these email IDs, the users should not have any confusion. Means that if you have some confusing signs or symbols, try to avoid those in your email IDs. And also, you need to make sure that these strings are valid strings, because some of these strings may not be really valid. If you're going to use a particular script, we need to make sure that is a valid script. There are some tools available for you to test those. So if you actually look at those reference ID and tables, and also we have a tool called LGR tool to validate the strings as well. So we would encourage, before creating these mailboxes, we would encourage you to use these tools and check whether it can validate and also it's a proper string and so on. Also, it is recommended that when you create a EAI-based email ID, always it's good that you create some alias, because in case if the mail cannot be delivered to the local language-based EAI-based email ID, at least if you have an ASCII-based alias, it can still be delivered to an ASCII-based email ID. So it's a good practice that you try to have some alias, create some ASCII-based email ID as well, so that the user can still get the email. Next slide. Yes, I think that's what I wanted to convey with regard to supporting email address internationalization or email IDs in local language scripts. So this is more importantly for someone who is looking after mail servers or the mail infrastructure. And these are some reference materials as well, and also how you can be involved in this whole process. There is a working group as well on email address internationalization. You can see more details through UASG website, and these are some further links for those places. Uh, that's all what I wanted to convey, and thank you very much for listening. Thanks, Amma.
Thank you, Champika. Um, and let's uh, we move on. So, with this background, I think what we wanted to do is listen to uh, some of the people who actually have been providing these services related to domain names and emails, the different top level domain countries as well as generic top level domains. and we want to look at both the business and the technical issues. We have um, um, three panelists here who would take us through some of the experiences they have encountered during their work. We'll start with Walter Wu, who we've already introduced, and he'll share some of the challenges and some of the outreach efforts being done in China to address these challenges. So over to you, Walter.
Okay. Thank you, Summer. Hello, everyone. It's my great honor to be invited to join the panel and share the UA progress in China. Actually, in China, the UA outreach activities is led by CNDI, the Chinese Domain Names Initiative. This organization is initiated by the Internet Society of China and was founded in January 2020. This also serves as the UASG China local initiative. Uh, the CNDI was co-founded by all of the biggest internet companies in China, like Baidu, 360, Sina, NetEase, and the major IDN registry and registrars. Before I start to share the UA status and the progress in China, I will share some basic data of Chinese IDN market. Next slide, please. Actually, from this table, we can see among global top 10 IDN GTLDs, there are 8 of them was Chinese TLD. Next slide, please. Um, this data is collected in the Q1 of this year. By that time, there are 57 Chinese ID in GTLDs globally. The total registration of ID in GTLD is around 400,000, which means around 500,000 of the GTLD Chinese domain name was registered. And plus that, the .cn, the Zhongguo, the Chinese IDN, also have 1.7 million registrations. So altogether in China, Chinese IDN, there are around 2 million domain name was registered. So we can see the Chinese IDN GTLD account for the vast majority of the global IDNs. So I think the progress of the Chinese IDNs in China, especially the UA progress, which is means a lot to the entire new GTLD program and the UA program. Next slide, please. And actually, one of the most important work of the CNDI in this year is in Q1, CNDI ran a measurement report on the browsers supporting issues. So let's see the exact data. Next slide, please. So in this measurement statistics, we just test the major PC browsers and the mobile browsers in China. In China market, that the Chrome, the Microsoft, and the Safari will still be the major one, but there are some browsers which was launched by the biggest internet companies like Baidu, 360, Sogo, those companies, Huawei, they have their own browser. So we ran the test for not only the international browsers, but also the local browsers. The next one, please. And our test, we not only give a simple test for whether the domain name was correctly resolved, but we also set up different standard, like whether the domain name was correctly resolved, but also we also will see whether the browser solve the display problem, whether they show the ASCII the Punicode on the address bar, or whether they already transfer those Punicode into the Chinese alphabet originally. So that's also another measurement point. So altogether, we test all of the Chinese IDN, but as I mentioned just now, there are over 50 Chinese IDN GTLD globally, but we only choose half of them. We will choose the Chinese IDN which was approved by the Chinese government. MIT could be officially launch services in China, because we believe in that case, those domain name will get a major registration and end user, which is more practical on the measurement test. Next one, please. From this table and the next one, we can see, actually, just like what I mentioned, like the measurement test not only test whether it is correctly resolved, but also on the display issue. But so you can see the A means both the resolved and display was perfect. We can see from the PC end, most of the browser can support the IDN pretty well, but we also find some new problems, which is QQ Tencent browser on the Mac OS end, they suddenly do not support the idea, which is we already send some notification to Tencent, which is, I think, that is a kind of update problem or the technical update problem, because originally QQ browser can support the IDM pretty well. Next one, please. The on the mobile side, which is the test result is not as good as the PCN, but compare with 2 years before we launched the similar measurement report, we should say even on the mobile end, the browser support issue has been dramatically improved. Next slide, please. So here is some summary about this measurement test. The browsers are, generally speaking, the browsers from those especially those top internet companies in China, those browsers has was improved, their support of to the IDN. Although most of the Chinese IDN can be resolved, but some UA readiness function need the further improvement. For example, the display of IDN info in browser's address bar is not correct in some cases. And there is still a gap between the Chinese domestic browsers and the international browsers in the IDN support. We should say the international browser like the Microsoft, Google Chrome, and Safari, they did very good. But some local ones, they still need to improve on the UA readiness. And the last one is I just mentioned the mobile end is not as good as the PC end. Next slide, please. And here I will do some brief introduction about the UA outreach and engagement work of the CNDI and all of the three China UA ambassadors. Next one, please. Actually, the UA readiness is three major things in China. First is the browser. So we take the browser support as the primary task in China UAE issues. So the CNDI organized a trip to visit like Sogo and Baidu, which they are the search engine, but they also have a major browser which generate a lot of internet users application. So we visit them, to talk about the search engine and also the browser issues. The next one, please. And also, the EAI is another important issue. The biggest EAI vendor is Tencent and NetEase. We visit both Tencent and NetEase, and we make some dramatic progress with them because Tencent has mentioned that in their new version of the WeChat email server, they will 100% support the Chinese Chinese email address function. So I think with support of, and NetEase is actually under the progress of development and testing. And the CNDI expected that in the next 1 or 2 years, the general environment of EAI in China will be ready, and at that time, the enterprise end of email provider began to launch the EAI, the email end that can serve Chinese ID and email, which means in the next 1 or 2 years, the dramatic the readiness in the email address will be solved. Next slide, please. And CNDI also ran some online training course because the pandemic issue, and sometimes we it's very difficult to run the local, even the face-to-face event. So we tried to set up some online training course. I also was invited to give a introduction, a training program about the IDN, the history, the market, and also the UA readiness, UA status. So that kind of activities is actually help a lot to, especially to those people which is not inside of a community. They can learn, about the status of IDN and the UA issue, which we believe that's very helpful for that kind of outreach work. Next slide, please. I will give some major conclusion about the China ID and UA issue. We think that the major internet service providers, have before that, maybe they are not familiar with the new GTLD, the ID, and the UA, but now we believe that with the effort of the CNDI, those internet companies have already realized that. I think from their basic point of view, they will also want to support, and especially the idea, follow the IETF and ICANN standard. I think that is the basic attitude of those internet companies. But to different vendor, they will have a different issue. They need the time to correct them, to develop them, especially the email solution. Like Tencent and NetEase are very concerned about they just want to keep it very safe and maintain the email the email solution, which is they have over one point they have 700 million users, using their email system, which we believe that they are talking about the truth. It also takes toolkits. Those function, for the support of IDN is not really good. I think that's kind of a challenge, and also need a long time to persuade, to educate, persuade, and let them understand the value for IDN and the importance of the UA issues. So I think that's still a long way to go for the 100% UA readiness environment for IBM in China. Next one, please. I think that's the end. Yes. Okay. Thank you, everyone.
Okay, so thank you, Walter, and sorry, our um, um, we will now invite Anason to start. She's going to be talking about the CCTLDs from Laos and the work which is actually being done by the community in Laos around IDNs and universal acceptance. Anason, please.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Anison, and I am a director of CCTLD division in Lao National Internet Center under Ministry of Technology and Communication. It is my great fun to be a panelist in this session today, and I would like to share with you about the key component and commendation for the implementation of the IDN and universal acceptance solution in the ASEAN regions. First of all, next please. First of all, I would like to share the experience of applying IDN.Lao. Learning with representative of the CCTLD.LA, we will study and consult to applying the IDN CCTLD.Lao. In 2017, we were preparing the relating document to show that Lao is the indicated name of country Lao in the Lao language. In January 2018, we have submitted the application with the related document that we have prepared. During the application overview, the review of the application, we get the advice from the ICANN to update some point in our application, and we have resubmit the Lao LTR in 2019. Sorry, have an echo. Finally, the serving evaluation for that Lao was successfully passed. The evaluation in the middle of the 2019 and was delegated in 2020. Next slide, please. And we have provided the 10 category of IDN registration according to the CCTLD of registration IDN is very small number due to the most organization, the email system not support EAI yet. So it need to do the many steps to setting up the server, and it quite hard work for us. Next slide, please. And we we have three domestic registrar, and one of them is the set.com, which quite famous registrar in the Japan. For the overseas market, we already have one international registrar. Next slide, please. Through the study of IDN, we see that there are many challenges for the IDN marketing. Therefore, we apply to do the research on that with the ASEAN project. And we had done the statistic workshop of ASEAN activity on guideline to promote the use of IDN and IDN CCTLD among ASEAN countries. It's hosted by LAPDR in December 2020. Next slide, please. And the participants of this workshop are the ASEAN member states, ICANN, and the local registrar. The IDN in particular form a value resource for non-English speaking countries and is a diverse community consisting of a number of non-English speaking countries. This study aimed at developing focus on guidelines and specifically for the government and IDN CCTLD manager of the ASEAN country. The mission objective of this project are to conduct a data study on primary status of the IDN and the CCTLD of ASEAN by collecting data from the ASEAN member states to do the data analysis, then provide the recommendation and guideline. Next slide. Yes, this slide. And the general conclusion of this project, the ASEAN domain name market and industry are far from being major business carry manifested by the number of registration per 1,000 of able-bodied residents. The respective value are far Europe or Australia and New Zealand, among others. Next slide, please. Yeah. Also, the cross-country analysis export quite drastic different and disparity in the term of the level of development of national CCTLD related ecosystem. Meanwhile, give the region significant population and economic growth rate, the current capacity and potential demand for the domain name industry product appear very significant. With CCTLD are forced to play a special role across the region. With some exception, they do not hold a dominating market position in the most ASEAN countries. However, they have recently tended to expand across the ASEAN region. As a part of ASEAN Pacific regions, as home to biggest number of non-Latin script, IDN CCTLD, with some exception, struggle to take root in the most ASEAN countries, and their performance has been well be the median international benchmark. For the universal exception still is the very new concept, and there is the great need to explicit it, and awareness rising efforts focus on the local stakeholder and the resident to ensure a rapid development and uptake of the UA-related product. And with the quite solid legal, economic R&D infrastructure foundation at the hand and the traditional societal pattern being quite homogeneous across the ASEAN region. The task of development, adoption, promotion, and implementation of both ID and CCTLD and the UA is based on the national government that should proactively initiate, support, promote, and spread aid program and the project in the IDN or UA area, working as the pastoral and major consumer of their output. In so doing, until the under aspect of the ASEAN and its individual body, the government should seek to ensure a necessary level of cooperation and coordination in the planning and implement of the region-wide program, and where possible seek economic of scale and synergy generated by both economic tier and regional cooperation, linguistics, and cultural similarities. Next slide, please. Following the lead, government stakeholders should be keenly aware that under the pinning future success are the engagement with different stakeholders, such as the technical and academic, and for the expert community, and in the first place, as well as the innovative mechanism to ensure cross-stakeholder community collaboration, such as joining a task force, open formula, and so on. Private business and mass media are equally important at the stage of the project implementation by rendering the required expertise, funding, and coverage of the project underway, thereby contributing to their sustainable in the long run. At the present stage, stakeholders in the ASEAN should have the clear understanding about that both IDN and UA deployment and the rollout will remain the quite niche project. However, would require what may appear to be this proportionally high degree of commitment, consistency, and patently, as they do not promise a quick return. Notwithstanding their seemingly precisely nature, they have potential for the emerging in the future as yet another diverse of the social economic development in the ASEAN regions, and credible meaning for the implementation of the most audacious strategies. There should also be full consist among all the stakeholders that most of effort prove most effective if undertaken and well arrived in close collaboration with the international community and the major industry fora and expertise and best practice exchange platform such as with the ICANN and the US Steering Group in the particular. And the mission of the future progress in the IDN UA area should include a clear realization of the indisputable benefits from the building on the author success story, while avoid already obvious pitfall and the maximize already exist position effective. And those are the key components and recommendation for the implementation of the IDN and universal exception solution in the ASEAN region that we have do the research on it. And that's all for my presentation. And thank you very much for listening. Thank you.
Thank you, Anason, for sharing the work and progress by the Lao community and also the findings and recommendations. Um, we will move on, and let me invite Pensuri to share the work which is being done by TH Nick on Thai IDNs and their universal acceptance. Pensuri, please.
Thank you so much for inviting me to today's panel. This is Pensri Arunratana Mongkol from THNIC Foundation. So my presentation will be on the business and technical issues related to UA and update on efforts we are working to promote UA adoption in Thailand. So I will share with you the experiences from THNIC IDN and EAI perspective. The Thai Network Information Center Foundation or THNIC is the supporting organization of .th, .ch, and .thai IDN CCTLD. As of January 2021, THNIC has we have more than 33,000 domain name registered under .th and around 18,000 domains under .thai. We have been working on the IDN implementation, especially on the technical part, as mentioned by Champika, since .thai IDN was introduced to the Luzon. Next slide, please. So let's start with the business issues we experienced. The first and important issue is the product positioning in terms of business. As in the early day, internet was started and used mostly by groups of people in which the English language is not their barrier. Currently, the internet is everywhere and should be for everyone. While there are a lot of Thai people that are not familiar with the English alphabet, we aim that we can use the internet. They can use the internet equally with Thai IDN and EAI. So it means that our Thai IDN and EAI will be the linguistical inclusive internet for them. So the next issues we are facing are that the current demands on Thai IDN and EAI are still slow are still low. So for your information, .thai domain at the end of last year, as I said, is about 18,000 domains. And .thai has been introduced since 2011. So this year is our 10th anniversary of .thai. So up to August, .thai has been increased during this year around 35%, and we expect to reach 30,000 domains by the end of the year, which will mark 50% increasing. So the growth came from many activities we did this year as part of the anniversary promotion and UA local initiative. Having said that, we think the hype of the demands cannot be generated by the promotion. So one reason I would like to mention is that the time to market, which have two different aspects here. The first one is that IDN and EAI were introduced late. As mentioned earlier, that .thai was introduced in 2011, while .com and .th were introduced long before that. Therefore, most internet users are used to or familiar with the ASCII domains and email addresses. In terms of business, the goal normally set to global market, then using English domain name would be a suitable choice. But things change with the effect of COVID-19. Next slide, please. You can see that the government of Thailand tried to reach local citizens with a lot of campaign to help maintain the local market and local spending. The business also changed their target to local customers. Therefore, the local language domain name come into the spot as a good solution to reach the target. So this is the right timing. This slide on the left show the example of Thai government half-half co-payment project, which enroll more than 40% of Thai population. The domain name for enrollment is Thai IDM, ending with .com. While the right image show the Tourism Authority of Thailand project to stimulating tourism activity with Thai IDN domain, Tour Tia Thai IDN. So we think that this is the right time for the localized domain name during this period. We found out that more than 1,000 or the average of 1,000 domain name Thai IDN ending with .com has been registered newly every month, and almost the same as for .thai this year. So the last business issue related to UA is that the UA ready means that web or application service providers need to put resources to make it happen, and this might not be the priority of them. So next slide, please. So I will move on to the technical issue related to UA. Besides the technical issue about EAI, UA readiness, Samad and Champika mentioned earlier, I would like to focus on the following three topics that led us to the recent THNIC activities. One of the issues we are facing from the business is that they have limited resources to make their service or application support UA. So they normally want to grab or utilize existing tools or libraries that can immediately use. But it turned out that there are only a few UA support library or open sources. Besides that, most of the technical resources or materials are in English, which means that local developer will need to spend more time to learn and to follow the instruction. The last technical issue I would like to mention is that even though we are aiming to provide the service to the local community, we are in the global ecosystem. Number of internet users today are spending time on their daily life on the social media platform. So UA ready would be necessary, especially for user experience in these global platforms. This is how potential customer and user learn about IDN and decide if they want to use it. So look at some example. Next slide, please. So this is Facebook post. Like I trying to post the government promotion URL, which is in thaiidn.com. Once I put the post in and publish the post, the Facebook show, you can see that it is funny code or the A label, not the U label in Thai. So with this incompatible or the user experience will be very, it is bad user experience, as the user and the poster may not want to see the A label. So next slide, please. This one is another platform that we built during the COVID-19, the guestbook platform. So the patient can share with their families and friends how their quarantine or symptom they're having during the COVID-19 infected. So with the Google Chrome, if you place at the URL and try to copy in, you can see that it is in U label, but when you paste on other social media channel, it is the A label. So with this weird character for the friends or family of the patient. So the service provider needs to do the workaround solution, like provide the tools that they can copy and paste with the U label instead of the A label. Okay, this is the ad hoc solution. So as I mentioned, those are the main issues that we face during IDN, EAI, and UA adoption journey. I believe other non-English native communities are also facing the same. So if you have the same difficulties and would like to communicate or reach out for the possible tools and solutions, please join UASG. Together, I think we can move forward to find better solutions for our local user. Together, we can gain more power to convince the big platforms to be UA ready. So next slide, please. In dealing with both business and technical issues I mentioned, THNIC has been doing a lot of that activities in terms of IDN and EAI adoption promotion. Then with UA steering group, we started the Thailand UA local initiative in September last year. The local initiative program is to increase UA awareness and adoption among the Thai internet stakeholders, as well as to educate related parties on the UA ready. Next slide, please. Okay, these are some information example of our activities. I will highlight some. The first one is the video in Thai language to deal with the technical issue mentioned earlier. Uh, Next slide, please. We organize webinar and training to communicate with the developer stakeholders, uh, maintains and enhance local Thai online resources. Next slide, please. Yeah, we maintain and enhance the local Thai online resources through Wikipedia and website รู้จัก .thai or in English it is known.in.th. And next slide, please. We do outreach to more stakeholders, including government agency and business industries. We work on to promote the usage of EAI. Next, please. So in some like web service, they are not supporting the Thai EAI. So we come up with the digital identity to authentication service so that the one who have Thai EAI can access online services through this authentication service. So we call it Kon.Thai, which is mean Thai people. Next slide, please. So our next activity is the UA GitHub pull request hackathon. Next slide, please. So we aiming at more UA ready libraries for the communities and to build up the UA Thai developer communities, which we believe will benefit to all internet users as the whole. In summary, communication to all stakeholders, especially with the developer communities and government agency to expand the IDN and EAI and UA awareness are the key activities that will move things forward for us. So I think that's all of my part. Thank you.
Thank you, Pensri, for taking us through the um, activities which is being conducted by THNIC to start or to address the UA challenges. Um, okay, so we will now open the floor for any comments or questions to any of the panelists, and we'll be happy to, I guess, answer that. So let me stop here, see if there are any questions. Please feel free to type them in the chat, or if you'd like to speak, I guess you could raise your hand, and then the organizers could help you, I guess, speak and ask the question. So let me see if there are any questions. Again, feel free to either raise your hand or type the question or comment in the chat. Okay, so if there are no questions, let me. Oh, we have a hand up. Um, sure. Porchana, please go ahead. You would need to unmute.
Okay, thanks so much. Could I ask about something related to, do we have any measurement about how we increase the equality when we apply or working with universal acceptance? I mean, the equality in the internet space. Yeah, that is the question.
Okay, and would anybody want to take that up?
So, can you give more information regarding equality or measurement, which kind of equality?
Sure. So, Porchanan, could you try to maybe add a little more explanation or clarification to your question?
Or give us some examples?
Uh, Porchanan, can you need to unmute?
Okay, thank you. I just allow to unmute. I would like that to know that do we have any measurement like in percent of inclusive that we could count that people who use internet can be included in the internet world by applying universal acceptance.
Right. Maybe I can start by going back to one of the slides which I presented earlier. Just give me a second. Sorry about doing a quick scroll back up. But in one of the slides I shared, this is some data which has been compiled by Visual Capitalists. The link to the original sources at the bottom. But this is showing the number of people who are anticipated to come online from the different regions. And if you see that a majority of the people who will be coming online are going to be from South Asia, East Asia, Africa, and probably Latin America. So when we say about making internet inclusive, this data in a way shows that not only a majority of people who are currently online may be using local languages, but also some of the new users of internet coming online in the future will also be dependent on local languages when they use the internet. So therefore, when we make the internet enabled in local languages, we are actually in a way making it more inclusive for these people. uh, I would also like to invite any other panelists if they would. Um, yeah, please
Maybe
go
I
ahead.
can join. Yeah. So for me, I think one of the government project is that to have a official channel for a government agency to send and receive like document between each other, like government agency only. Next measurement, I think we may count on the number of email addresses for people, Thai people, if they can like get the official mailbox for them to use or to communicate with the governments. So I think until that time, we will know how many Thai internet population is can be included. So because as I said, many of Thai people they cannot use English language. So the EAI will be another channel for them to count on the number of email addresses for Thai population might be a good measurement. I think yeah.
Thank you, Pensri. We can take more questions.
Samad, I have one request. As
Yes, please go ahead.
yeah, as I mentioned, that some big platform, like social media platform, like Facebook, they are not, it is not UA ready yet. And I heard that ICANN is, or UASD is trying to reach to those Facebook platform like. So will there be any more effort to make them receive or display the IDN for the community? So maybe Samar or Pirinan can help.
So this is Sarmat. So I think there is some ongoing effort in reaching out to global tech companies. We are currently in the process of doing through Universal Acceptance Training Group, doing a measurement or gap analysis for universal acceptance with many of the social network organizations, for example, Facebook, but also others. And based on the data, which we probably have maybe in next 2 to 3 months, there is plan to reach out to these global organizations to see if we can use that data to present to them to see if they can address that those issues. I also see a hand up by Pitinan, please.
Oh, hello. Yes, hope you can hear me. Thank you, Samad, and thank you, Pansy, for the question as well. I'm Pitinan from ICANN. just wanted to add on Samad's point that this effort on trying to reach out to the big company is also in the action plan of the FY22 of the EAI working group in the USG. So once we have the report, we will hopefully take this up. And if the participants from other countries also face some similar issues, like displaying the U labels or some other issue that relevant, please feel free to share with us so then we can build a stronger case. Thank you.
Thank you both.
Thank you. Pitinan, okay, so are there any other questions, comments? Let's see.
May I have a question to
Yes, please, Ms.
Mr. Jamishka? I find interest in the EAI safety. Due to our office also still meets the problem with email server not supporting EAI. So I would like to ask you more. Do we have to change a new email server or just do some protocol or have integrated some cache in the server as well? Or do you have any suggestion for us?
Actually, the question was not very clear. It was breaking up. I think if I just try to guess, were you asking about the various tools and services in terms of the support? Is that what you're asking? Sorry, I didn't get the full question.
Okay, may I rephrase my question? My question is, due to our email server currently not support the EAI, so I need to know, we need to change the new server or just add some feature and just integrate some test for that or add some protocol or something? I ask for the suggestion from you because currently we are studying on it, so we want to know what we have to do at the first step for let our email server can accept the for the our email server can support the email in the ideal language in the ideal.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, actually, in fact, thanks, Samad, for putting this slide. So this, I would recommend you to actually, in fact, the whole purpose of having this slide is also actually for that. So you can see there is this list of tools, the mail servers and various other related tools as well. So you may have to check exactly what you are using here and against the current support. So if obviously now if your current email server cannot support that, then there is some concern there. But if it can support, then it's a matter of configuring. So you may have to check exactly what you have and the current support of that. There have also been some updates to this document. There is a document number, which is, I think, USG 30A. I think that's the latest. So I would recommend you to actually have a look at that as well.
May I? May I join the discussion? So.
Yes, Pensri, please.
Thanks. So in terms of EI implementation, Technic has like materials at the rujak.thai or knows.in.th, maybe in my slide at the activities. So you may start from that one. So we include all, I mean, the step that if you are going to build your new email server, so with software you can install and how to configure to support EAI. So we have both support, or you can have local mailbox in your language, something like that. So even if the contents are in Thai, I think you can study or use Thai language. I mean, you can, yeah, read Thai. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
And if you have any, yeah, and if you have any issue or difficulty, just contact us. So you can use the APAC mailing list as mentioned by Samad at the last slide. Okay.
Also, Pensri, actually, Pensri,
Yes.
I saw that. Thanks for providing those resources and the training info. When you did present that, I wanted to ask that those training are in English or in Thai?
In Thai, mostly in Thai.
Mostly in Thai. Okay,
Yeah.
okay.
All right. Thank you all for responding for the question as well as the responses. We are closing on the time here. So what I would do is request all of the panelists to make their final statements before we close. So I would request Champika, then Walter, then Aniston, and then Petri to make a quick, short statement, maybe 1 minute each, before we close. So starting with Champika.
Yeah, thanks, Ahmad. I think I would actually take back exactly the same, the question that was asked now. So it's good to do some audit first and try to see what tools that you have, what services that you have, and then uh, check their support against these things that what we discussed, like UA, EAI support. So if that doesn't support, then you may have to actually either you have to go for a different option, different service, different tool, or if it can support, then it's a matter of going through the material and then trying to enable. So I would say, probably best thing is try to do some audit first, and then start it from there.
Thank you. And just to add on to that, if you have any questions or any concerns, feel free to reach out to us. There's also some contact email information, as well as there's as Pensri was suggesting, there's an APAC EAI implementers group which is available. So feel free to reach out to us in case of questions. So over to Walter, if you would like to make a final statement.
Okay. Thank you, Farmer. I think the UA readiness work is very important for the exploration on the market for idea. From my personal experience in the last 20 years, if IDN do not have a UA readiness environment, it will be very difficult for the registry and the registrar to persuade the end user to register them. And if there's no end user registered by IDN, then the internet users will not got the opportunity to use the IDN. So it is like the chicken and egg issues. But no matter how difficult, if we are in the industry, we need to put the effort to just like we want to develop a city, we need to build the road first. No matter whether there are cars on the highway, we have to build the infrastructure correctly. So I think that's a similar issue in the UA, in the UA readiness. So as the, so personally, I think I appreciate all of ICANN and UASG community and the leadership of UASG has been made for improve the UA issue, but it still takes a long way to resolve totally resolve the issue. So I think in China we have because we have over around 2 million IDN users, end user to register and use the domain name. That could be a very good exploration for to solve the UA issue. So we will keep in touch and share what is going on in China. And thank you, Sam.
Thank you, Walter. Anderson?
Hi, thank you for inviting me to this session, and I hope also we can share the experience together. And for us, we just get the IDN and we have the meeting, have to learn from it and how to start. And thank you very much for ICANN and Thailand to support us for about the several training and invite us to join some course that Thai have organized some the EAI setting, and hope we can cooperate and help each other together. Thank you.
Thank you, Anderson. Pensri, please.
Okay, so I think being UA ready benefits customers and users by expanding their choice in domain names and email addresses. We support for more internet users, both local and international, who prefer using local script. Even if the UA readiness and the demand on of the IDN and EAIs are like a chicken and eggs, like service provider are always saying that there is less demand on the UA because low, low, we have low IDN or email at EAI user, but we think UA readiness offer better and greater value to user by they can staying up to date with the latest new type of domain names and email addresses. And I think the IDN and EAI, we provide a unique identity on the internet for local user. As a group of UASG, I think we trying to include more internet user to global internet community. Thank you.
Thank you, Pensri. I think one of the things we must all appreciate is that supporting universal acceptance is not something which can be achieved by one organization or a few people supporting internationalized domain names and internationalized email addresses, but it can only be achieved if all of us upgrade our systems, because at the end of the day, our systems are interacting with each other. And even if one of the systems is not working, the whole system doesn't support EAI and internationalized domain names. So all of us three have a small but significant role to contribute in eventually achieving universal acceptance of domain names and email addresses. And as we've seen, that is sort of a key to eventually provide better access and more inclusivity to internet users globally. So I would like to thank all of the attendees for patiently going through um, and listening and interacting with the panelists. I would also like to thank all the panelists taking the time out for this session and sharing their experience and expertise. And with that, I'd like to close the session and hand it back to the organizers. Thank you all very much for joining.
Thank you all.
Thank you all.
Thank you, everyone.
All right. So I think we can close this session. Thank you and bye bye.